Hello and welcome to the So What podcast, in which political economic analyst JP Landman discusses the issues uppermost in the minds of South Africans. You can find a written version of this content on JP's website, jplandman.co.za. I am Ruda Landman and I am your host. This conversation accompanies JP's newsletter dated the 18th of October 2024, titled Some You Win, Some You Lose. It has been a busy 2 weeks.
Yes, indeed it has been. You know the old saying that there are weeks where nothing happens and then there are days when weeks happen. And certainly in the first 2 weeks of October, a lot of things have happened, both in the policy space and in the political space.
Let's begin with policy.
Well, first of all, we got a new visa regime, and it's a new visa regime that has long been in the making, but at last it has now been gazetted in the government gazette. So this is now the law of the land, so to speak, and it provides for two things. It provides for a point-based system when you apply for a South African visa. So that takes care of a lot of the subjectivity and discretion, because there are points for this, points for that, and that is clear and unambiguous. And secondly, it provides for a remote work visa. So people can come to South Africa and live here but work elsewhere. And of course that is also enormously beneficial. We have a lot to offer in terms of facilities and climate and personal services and so on. So for people to work elsewhere but come and live here, spend the money here, buy goods and services here is clearly a big plus. So those two changes give us a much easier and much more modern visa regime.
And that was only the latest in the Project Vulindlela's priority list, huh?
Yes, indeed. Project Vulindlela had as its priorities water, electricity, water licenses really, electricity and a few other items, and visas were one of them. Visas can now be ticked. The other items that can be ticked is spectrum release. That was done and achieved and has unleashed a lot of investment. The electricity regulation reform, that was done. Mr. Ramaphosa signed the bill, facilitating private sector investment into renewables. So far, about 500 billion rand has been unlocked and counting. That number keeps on going up. So that was done. Breaking up Eskom. Transmission has been separated out of Eskom. Distribution still remains to be done. Ensuring electricity supply. We are now over 200 days of no load shedding and again counting. It seems as if it's holding. And water licenses had to be fixed, and that was done. The bigger problems of water, of which we in Gauteng are very well aware of, that will be tackled in Vulindlela 2. Vulindlela 2 has not been announced yet, but it will probably come out in the next couple of weeks, and it will cover water security, as opposed to water licenses, water security, logistics, more electricity reform, local government, spatial inequality, and digital transformation. Now, water, spatial quality, and local government, those are big and important issues. They are tough nuts to crack, and it'll be interesting to see how Vulindlela 2 deals with that.
Since you start with, or you captioned this, some you win, some you lose, Transnet's loss in the court last week was a setback.
Yes, it was a setback for Project Vulindlela. The port reform is part of logistics reform, and what happened there was Transnet has, under government pressure, government guidance, policy guidance, issued a 25-year concession to an international Philippine company to come and run the Durban port, but also to invest 11 billion rand to modernize it, new equipment and so on. That went out on tender. There were about, I think, 22 people or 22 entities interested in the license. It was then awarded to the Philippine company. One other international logistics company, Maersk, who's quite well known in South Africa, one sees their name all over, objected and said Transnet did not apply the tender conditions correctly. And they went to the High Court to interdict the concessioning. The judge agreed with Maersk, and Transnet was interdicted. temporarily. There'll now be a second phase where the case will be heard on the merits, and we will then see what the judge decides. I hope the courts do not take a final decision on this, because I don't think that's the way these things should be handled. You may remember that we've had a similar situation with spectrum release. When everything was set and done, ready to go, three big ICT companies brought applications against spectrum release, claiming that it was prejudicing their particular business model. That issue in the end was resolved outside the courtroom. Executive decisions were taken, compromises were made, and spectrum release was not only done, but was done and dusted. So I'm looking to that example to be pursued in the case of this port concessioning. That's the way to resolve it, not via the courts.
What's happening in the relationship between government and business?
Well, quite interesting. The first phase of government-business cooperation, which goes back about a year or so, has now been concluded with projects finalized. And now, on the 1st of October, they signed what one can call a Phase 2 agreement, where they will carry on working together. And they specialize in three areas particularly. And the three areas are energy, ongoing energy reform, transport and logistics, and crime and corruption. Since the 1st of October, it has become clear that there's a fourth item that has been added to the list, and that is water. Particularly in Gauteng. So big companies have stepped forward and say they would like to play a role, or they're capable of playing a role in resolving the water crisis. So those are the four areas on which business and government are cooperating. And you will notice that it dovetails Vulindlela 1 and 2 almost perfectly. So the business government cooperation fits into making the reforms of Vulindlela 1 and 2 work. That's really where they fit in.
How can business help when it comes to water? Because water is becoming an enormous problem.
Indeed, absolutely, particularly in Gauteng. There are two ways. The first way is by way of seconding people and getting management expertise into the various water bodies, helping with planning and execution. But secondly, and in a sense more important, investment. Water is underinvested in South Africa. I'm not referring to the big capital projects. The private sector is already involved, but we're talking about distribution at local government level. In Johannesburg, something...
So pipes in the road, next to the road?
That kind of thing. I mean, the water infrastructure in Johannesburg, in Gauteng in general, is old, and it has to be replaced, and that is quite a mammoth task. And you've got to figure out new ways of doing that on the construction side, but also on the financing side. And that's where business could play a role.
And to jump to a completely different thing, how do you see our international relationships at the moment? Is it possible, really, to be non-aligned?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a number of very successful countries that are very successfully non-aligned. Think of India. They are probably the prime example. Brazil is a very good example. They're close to the US. US is a big market, but they retain a separate identity. India, as I've already said, is a past master in that. So yes, it is possible. What we saw in October is that President Ramaphosa went to China to attend the Africa-China Cooperation Summit, but he was received by Xi Jinping on a state visit. Which is quite an honor or a compliment. And it's quite clear that the Chinese are very keen on closer relations with South Africa. At the same time, last week, the United States Embassy in South Africa released a statement to say that they will have a Bosberaad with the South African government on future relations. And they wanted to develop, quote unquote, a strategic relationship with South Africa. Now, if you take this U.S. Embassy statement and you compare it to the U.S. Embassy allegations around Lady R, all unsubstantiated allegations, I must say.
Was that only last December?
That was very recent, yeah. Then you can see how far things have moved. So I think it's quite clear that the Americans would like to have a better relationship. We're having a good relationship with China. So let's see where this goes. But I think the fact that the U.S. Embassy is participating in this process and want to create a strategic relationship answers your question that, yes, it is possible to be non-aligned. But you have to be very clever and you must box very cleverly.
We might refer our listeners to a Netflix series we watched last night. It's called History 101. It's not new. It's been there for a while, but last night we watched a chapter called The Rise of China. It's 21 minutes and it's fascinating. It's a condensed overview, very worth watching.
Oh, yes, absolutely. We misunderstand China a lot. I think China also misunderstands the West a lot, but it is a reality. You can't ignore it. And yes, the listeners would benefit from watching it.
Coming back to home ground, once again we have to talk about Gauteng. Tshwane was a disaster, is a disaster, as far as this Johannesburger can see. What does it mean, locally and nationally?
Gauteng has always been a bit of an outlier in the sense that there are or were two centres of powers in the ANC that would have preferred to make a coalition, not with the DA and the other parties that we currently have in the coalition, but with the EFF and nowadays with MK. This goes back quite a while. What happened in the election in May was that the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal got thrashed. So they were taken out as a serious player. They only got 17% of the vote. And, in politics, if you don't have votes, you have nothing. In Gauteng, the ANC did a bit better. Here they got 35% of the vote, still a minority government, but they do control the province, and they're using that power base to shun the DA and to shun other moderate parties in the current government of national unity. They would prefer to go with the EFF and also MK. So there's clearly, that's where Gauteng is an outlier. Has been the case for a while, and that is simply playing out in Tshwane. And I think what we see in Tshwane is the ANC, Panyaza Lesufi, the ANC leader in Gauteng, is very proud that the ANC has reconquered, so to speak, metros in Gauteng, Johannesburg Metro, Tshwane Metro, that used to be governed by different coalitions and are now governed by an ANC coalition. It's a political aim, and they've succeeded in doing that. Whether that will pay off, well, that we will have to see. What happened in Tshwane is, in a sense, unfortunate. Action SA withdrew from the ruling coalition, the one that they had with the DA and other small parties, and then went into a coalition with the ANC. Now, they haven't really explained that. They said Michael Beaumont, their a national spokesman or national leader, not national leader, but an important leader, said the election in May created a new reality, and they had to adjust to this new reality of coalitions. Now that's fine, but why then swap one coalition for another? They claim that it's because the DA coalition was not willing to spend money on the black townships. I think, well, the DA of course denies that, but I think more important, they haven't tabled this issue in the coalition. And I think it's just an excuse that they're using afterwards. So Action SA has really pulled the plug there. That has now resulted in the mayor being removed. It has resulted in an ANC-led coalition. And then a further unfortunate thing happens, which shows you that we're not yet used to coalition politics in South Africa. Helen Zille then said, well, if Cilliers Brink cannot be a mayor in Tshwane, then the DA is not going to have any further talks with the ANC about Ekurhuleni, Johannesburg and Nelson Mandela Bay. Now that's very unfortunate because Panyaza Lesufi scored a victory in Tshwane. By now walking away from Ekurhuleni, you in a sense solidify his victory. Why do I say that? Well, the ANC mayor of Ekurhuleni is on record that he would prefer to have the DA in his mayoral committee. Not exclusively, but he wants them in his committee, in his mayoral management team. Why? In his words, we only have 2 years to go before the elections. It's not time for new ideas or talking. It's now time for service delivery. And he thought the DA could help with that, or having the DA in his mayoral committee will help with that. That door has now been shut. when the DA said they're not going to talk about further talks. The people in Nelson Mandela Bay will know that the situation there has been precarious for a long time, leading to instability. And likewise, this statement now has closed that door. So, I think we have a situation where some people philosophically do not want to deal with the DA do not want to promote the idea of the government of national unity at local level. But
some people in the ANC.
Yeah. But other people, through their style, is also jeopardizing the government of national unity or the idea of national unity at local level. So that's where we are. We'll have to see how this plays out over the next 2 years.
So what?
Well, I think the so what is that I do not for one moment think that the shenanigans in Gauteng and Tshwane and so on, that they are going to affect the government of national unity. I think the government of national unity will carry on with their program, which is clearly summarized in the Vulindlela program of action. That structural reform will play out. And when that structural reform has taken its course, it will certainly lift the economic growth in the country. We've got research from the Bureau for Economic Research in Stellenbosch showing us that it's quite possible to achieve a growth rate of 3 to 3.5% versus the maximum 1.5% we currently have. Now, if we move from a 1.5% economy to a 3.5% economy, that's really a game changer. And that can come out of the Vulindlela reforms. And that is firmly in place.
That actually summarizes all the separate points you make in your so what paragraph. The formation of national unity is a win. Gauteng is unlikely to upset or derail that. Big win that the process of structural reform at national level is proceeding apace, and it opens the possibility of a return to 3% plus growth over the next few years. Thank you for listening to the So What podcast. If you enjoy this content, please don't forget to leave a review and a rating, and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any future episodes. Also, tell your friends. Remember, you can find a written version of all JP's content at jplandman.co.za.